All right, so we are at week 7 of week 10 of exploring 10 filmmakers' filmographies. And so this past 7 days, I managed to watch 8 films by Abel Ferrara. And so we're just going to rank them from least favorite to most favorite. Let's go. All right, number 8 is easy, okay? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It's Pasolini from 2014. I almost had to shut this off twice, to be honest with you. Call me a prude or whatever, but the first time was during an early scene in the film when there was some graphic and vigorous fellatio happening on screen. And the second was near the end when we get to see a explicit random beach orgy scene. So the reason I didn't shut it off during those 2 occasions was, one, the first time, it's because it was pretty early, like I said, so I figured it was going to be a one and done thing. And then the second, I didn't because I checked the time and there was 20 minutes left. So I was like, okay, might as well just finish it. But if that doesn't bother you, Abel Ferrara's film, Pasolini, about Pasolini, Pier Paolo Pasolini, who was a jack of all trades of sorts, a Renaissance man who was a philosopher, and he used film and literature and poetry and plays to communicate his ideas. It's not worth seeing because whether you know next to nothing or actually nothing about Pasolini, or if you know quite a lot or even everything about Pasolini, which is impossible, you learn nothing new about the guy here. You learn nothing new about him. You learn nothing new about the circumstances in which he created his works, and you know nothing about his works. So it just feels pretty pointless, I gotta say. And even on a cinematic level, it feels pointless because Ferrara does do an interesting thing where he weaves 3 separate things. So one is the last 24 hours of Pasolini's life, and the other 2 is Ferrara imagining what the last works Pasolini was working on. So there's a film that he never finished that Abel shoots parts of, and there was a novel he didn't get to finish that Ferrara shoots parts of. And the problem is there's no distinct visual language between any of these 3 narratives, for lack of a better word. They are all presented the same way stylistically. They feel the same, they look the same, and they sound the same. And what that does is create kind of a one-noted experience. It's kind of a slog. There's no ebbs and flows. There's no build-up and release of tension or anything. It's just... The only positive I can really say is that out of respect for Pasolini and his family, Ferrara does not indulge in the accuracy of his savage murder. If you don't know, Pasolini was murdered for his political persuasion. He was a homosexual communist, but the film here suggests that he was killed because he was gay, when nothing I have heard or read or seen has indicated that. Everything I have heard, read, or seen says it had to have been tied to his political perspective. So that's a shame. They felt like they had to make that up. 1 star out of 4. Okay, so number 7 is The Driller Killer from 1979. I've actually known about this movie for a long time, but always avoided it because I figured it was going to be some sort of senseless B-movie gore fest. And what it turned out to be was something actually worse. So it stars Abel Ferrara. It stars himself as a guy named Reno. He's a struggling artist trying to make ends meet, but the bills keep piling up. His drug addict lesbian roommate keeps druggedly lesbianing, and the band next door keeps relentlessly rehearsing. So he does what any good dude would do with the stress, is go on a murderous rampage, of course. He takes a drill and kills just a couple of people. Yeah, that's right. In a 101-minute film, he kills a couple of people. And so I was pretty irritated during this because I had to sit through mediocre acting, mediocre directing, mediocre editing, mediocre music, and mediocre sound to only get a couple of kills. And these kills are not even that inventive, and nasty. They are, in fact, not very inventive at all or that nasty at all. But that's kind of personal. That's kind of, you have everybody's got their own personal threshold for violence. And I guess mine's kind of high. But even so, I don't really like gore fests or torture porn or whatever. I sometimes can't stomach them. So most of the movie ends up just being that band playing next door, whether it's rehearsing indoors or playing a show. It seems like this movie was actually made because Ferrara's friends who were in a band told him to make a movie around their band, and that's kind of what it feels like. That band makes up for what feels like half the runtime. So you can skip this one. It's another 1 out of 4 stars. All right, number 6 is Fear City from 1984. Call me a moron all you want. I guess you're probably right, but I somehow didn't expect a movie about an attacker attacking strippers would spend 90% of its runtime in strip clubs with strippers stripping awkwardly. Yikes, that is on me. I don't know why I didn't think that would happen. And this was Ferrara's biggest movie at the time. It was the first to be produced by a major studio, and it stars Tom Berenger as a co-owner of a management company for exotic dancers in Manhattan. He's also an ex-boxer who quit the sport when he inadvertently killed somebody in the ring, his opponent. And he became emotionally stinted and unavailable ever since, and that ended his relationship with a woman named Loretta, played by Melanie Griffith. But fast forward to the future, she's a client of his, stripping at clubs, and their relationship is rekindled when that unknown assailant is out there assaulting strippers because he wants to protect her. So yeah, shenanigans ensue, I guess. The film takes its name, Fear City, from a series of flyers distributed by the NYPD during the 1970s New York City financial crisis to warn tourists and visitors of the rising crime in the city. Excuse me. But the crime we see is not desperate, petty, or random violence. The violence here is from a specific individual against a specific group of people for a specific cause. So naming it Fear City based on these flyers doesn't really work. So that's not good. It wastes, but I mean, even worse than that, of course, that's barely anything. The worst thing is that it wastes a compelling cast, the compelling location of Manhattan, and a compelling premise for a commercialized stripping ad, basically. Its identity, the movie's identity is lost in the sleaze. Does it want to be an engaging character study? Does it want to be an intense police procedural? Does it want to be like a shocking psychological thriller, a softcore sexploitation flick? It doesn't know. I don't know. Ferrara apparently didn't have the talents to intertwine and juggle all these elements in a effective and effortless way. It becomes kind of a tonal mess. It just jumps from this tone to that tone, and that's usually not a fun time. And there's even the final fight is comical in a way I think was unintentional. But there is a good script in there, with occasionally funny dialogue, I will admit. There is some neat intercutting in that final duel, that climactic duel at the end. And Billy D. Williams, of course, is easy on the eyes. Hashtag no homo. 1 star out of 4, though. All right, and number 5 is Zeros and Ones from 2021. This was my most anticipated flick of the week, and sadly, it is ranked this low with a 1 star, and I'm going to say that again later at the end. It stars Ethan Hawke, one of my absolute favorites, in dual performances as one twin who is a raving leftist radical, and the other is a quiet soldier of sorts searching for him during the COVID era. There is a lot of truth on display in this movie, but unfortunately you can't see it. You can only hear it. It is just so dimly lit. You have to kind of squint. You're like this while you're watching. The only way you can see anything, honestly, is if you were there on set while they were filming it. Listen, I love a cryptic film. The thing is, though, there has to be something for us to latch onto. There's got to be things we can build an interpretation from. Jodorowsky and Bergman and Kaufman and Refn and Lynch and even Malick have all done this successfully, and this does not. Even if there were clues we could piece together something from, it's too dang dark. Like I said, it's just so dark you can't see him. You couldn't see him. It's like Abel Ferrara made this spontaneously on the fly with no script, no fully formed idea, and no preparation. It's pretty bizarre that this came from somebody who has been making movies since the 1970s. Yikes. Also worth mentioning, this is an 85-minute film that includes 2 instances of Ethan Hawke, the man, not acting as any of the roles or any other roles, of him on a laptop. The first happens in the opening of the film. It's him saying why he decided to do this project, kind of gushing over Abel Ferrara's, visions and films and stuff like that. And the second one closes the film. It's him admitting to you that he didn't even understand the film that he was just in, that you just watched. On top of that, Ferrara inserts a lot of these skippy, janky, slow-mo in random scenes, and you can't help but assume all these things were just to pad out the runtime. But there is an intriguing atmosphere in the film. I will not deny it that, but that's thanks largely in part to the score. And I do think there is veracity in its depiction of our lost and fallen world. 1 star. Okay, number 4 is Padre Pio from 2022. This was my second most anticipated film of the week. Now, this is Abel Ferrara's biopic about Francisco Forgione, who was known as Pio of I got it written here, Pietrelcina. But like his film Fear City, this movie is unaptly titled. It's called Padre Pio, but Padre Pio is barely in the thing. So there are 2 historical storylines occurring simultaneously right next to each other. Excuse me. One of Padre Pio arriving in San Giovanni Rotondo as he is struggling with his faith, and the other of the town's inhabitants suffering a nightmarish socio-political situation. So this parallel is effective and intriguing, but it lacks the proper balance of the 2. Like I said, Padre Pio is barely in it. He's maybe 30 to 40 minutes of the 4-minute runtime, which is a shame because when Shia LaBeouf, who plays Padre Pio, is on screen, he is mesmerizing. There are 2 scenes in particular that make you wonder how much of himself he's channeling and what he's going through spiritually. Worst of all, it doesn't have the emotion and the pacing and the narrative heft that the film so desperately deserved. It's mostly just it's on the same field, on the same frequency throughout the whole thing. And that's a bummer. Plus it has these inaccuracies I thought were pretty easily avoidable. But there are definitely positives about Padre Pio. That's why it's ranked number 4. First, I want to say that it presents the futility of adhering to the government of man and not the government of God. If you go all in one way or the other, entirely to the left or entirely to the right, what happens is both can and will eventually get you killed or get you to do the killing. It shows what happens when belief, faith, prayer, God, Jesus is rejected. Man relentlessly and ruthlessly turns on man. So I like that it gets into that. All the political strife it portrays coming from both ends of the political spectrum, whether it's the radical socialist Marxist communists or the government that's cracking down on their resistance. They're all equally depicted as evil. There's even a scene when the devil shows up in Padre Pio's chamber, claiming to be behind all the evils leading up to the war, all the evils during the war, and all the evils to come. So nobody gets off scot-free here. There are other spiritual truths here too, that Christ saves not only from suffering, but through suffering, that grace comes to a broken world, not a clean world, that God may sometimes be silent, but he is never absent, and that spiritual warfare is real and happens internally and externally. And there's, of course, its portrayal of sanctification being a very messy, ongoing process. So these are all great things, plus more. And that closing shot, the shot that this film ends on, is one for the ages for sure. But regardless of how good or bad this film could have been, what's really most important is that it transformed Shia LaBeouf's life for the better. During the production of this, prepping for the role, which he did for free, by the way, he immersed himself in Catholicism, attending Mass every day, reading Catholic liturgy, training to do Latin Mass, and all sorts of things, enrolling in the RCIA. During this process, with the help of a bunch of friars and priests, he actually, for real, gave his life to Christ, and I couldn't be happier for him. He was confirmed in 2023, late 2023, and he's expressed interest in joining the priesthood. So it feels pretty real, looks pretty real, and I hope that it sticks, and I hope that I see him one day when neither of us are no longer on this earth. 3 stars out of 4 stars. All right, number 3 is Tommaso from 2020. This stars Willem Dafoe as an obvious stand-in for Abel Ferrara himself, as an expat filmmaker living in Italy with his very young wife and their adopted daughter. Not so much a conventional story-centered movie than it is a series of semi-autobiographical vignettes following Tommaso/Ferrara as he attends AA meetings, learns more Italian, teaches an acting class while he's working on his next film, which still happens to be Ferrara's next film, his next film, Siberia. Now, Tommaso has a lot on its mind. So, for one, it's saying how much art is exercising personal demons and how inevitable it is that artists will take things from their own selves and their own lives into their work. But Ferrara does this explicitly and fiercely and thoroughly in this film. He casts his own wife and daughter as Tommaso's, and I would assume that Tommaso's own ego, guilt, jealousy, and paranoia is Ferrara's ego, guilt, jealousy, and paranoia. He bravely demonstrates the reality that despite being a recovered addict, one who's a recovered addict, their life can still be complicated and uneasy and imperfect. Excuse me. While sober, Ferrara/Tommaso is far from living a steady life. He's irritable and unfaithful. He's envious and self-centered and suspicious. Not even putting on fake empathy or performative compassion virtue signaling, basically. None of that leads to real peace and actual healing and true redemption. This is a lesson I think our Western world and the world in general, I guess, could still learn. Speaking of which, learning things, Ferrara has the stones to state the obvious truth some Western women are now realizing, and there's sources like the Huffington Post and the New York Times even confirming it, that third wave feminism is responsible for the lack of good men out there for them. In one of the AA meetings Tommaso attends, he articulates how a child needs both a father and a mother, not just a mother. When our culture not only seems to glorify it and romanticize it, it actually seems to encourage it. A woman who follows Tommaso and her, speech or whatever, seconds his sentiment. She even goes further with words like, we don't have relationships, we take hostages, And she says later in the same monologue, we're either dominating or we're completely underneath. She's not outright spelling it out, but what she is referring to is the dichotomy of third wave feminism and the mess it has made. This isn't a film about plot, but about processing and personal profession, so I gave it 3 stars out of 4. It was a kind of a close 4, actually. All right, number 2 is Siberia from 2020. This is a haunting and mysterious film centered around Willem Dafoe, again, as Clint, a man who has chosen to live the rest of his life as a barkeep in a isolated tundra. As he reaches the peak of his life, he starts to get tormented by, by dreams and memories and nightmares and visions. Well, and that's just the simplest interpretation. There's lots of different ways you can think about it. Is everything that unfolds Clint's life flashing before his eyes just moments before death? Is it all a cyclical purgatory while Clint is awaiting final judgment? Is it all Clint's psyche being navigated during some sort of hypnotherapy session? Is it all occurring in the deep recesses of his mind as he's slumbering solo in a secluded Siberian area? How much is literal? Maybe some of it, maybe all of it, maybe none of it. The Siberian portions aren't really Siberia at all, but like a metaphorical psychic space where Clint confronts or is confronted by Freudian complexes and Jungian self-reflections. There's a cave of naked mental patients, a desert of disfigured people in a tent, an encounter with a dark arts or black arts magician, a mass execution at night by bonfire, a reflection in water of his shadow self, and there's several sequences of sexual rendezvous and a woman giving birth to a cow's head and so forth. These are not clearly not literal things. These surreal sequences hint at Clint's unresolved emotions of guilt and regret, of emotional and spiritual longing, of repression and suppression, as he not I don't want to say living, I just want to say exists at the edge of the world, basically, in isolation. He's achingly alienated despite what seems to be his better judgment, subconscious or otherwise. It's like a self-exile, seems like. If it's not clear yet, this is not your traditional movie plot. This is a surreal, symbolic experience, an internal journey rather than a conventional story. Abel Ferrara is writing in a journal, so to speak, via Willem Dafoe in front of a camera. My rating for this will likely go up after more watches. So for now, I'm giving it 3 out of 3, but it one day could be a 4. All right, I see that I'm running way too long on this, so I'm going to make it quick. So number 1, China Girl from 1987. This is only loosely based off William Shakespeare's most popular play, Romeo and Juliet. Ferrara, what he does here, though, is focus more on the neighborhood conflict than the romantic one. Of course, he addresses the romantic one. So, starring new newcomers as the two doomed lovers, Tony and Ty, two younglings who meet at a dance club, an alternative dance club, it seems like. China Girl swaps the Capulet and Montague families in Verona for the Chinese of Chinatown and the Italians of Little Italy in New York City. It's a pretty cool translation into the modern context here for 1987. And both Tony and Ty have older brothers in gangs that forbid them from venturing out into the other's territory. So, of course, falling in love is especially egregious in their eyes. And since it is based on Romeo and Juliet, even loosely, you kind of know how it's all going to play out, right? But like I said, it's cool is seeing the translation into that time period and those people into this time period and these people. But what you might not know or expect is that Ferrara's frequent screenwriting collaborator tries to make it more bloody and more tragic. And he more or less succeeds. And Ferrara really amps up the tension leading up to Tony and Ty's fate really well, fabulously even. And for a film that's shot by a first-time DP, the movie is really, really well shot. It's got great camera work, great color, and great lighting throughout the entire thing. All right, that's all I am going to say, because this has gone way too long. And I'm taking drinks, too. That makes it even longer. So that's all 8 ranked. Now it's your turn to tell me what your favorite Abel Ferrara film is. Mine is actually China Girl. So like and subscribe to see who next week's filmmaker is. I'm going to warn you right now, it's a weird one. Cheers.
Why are there so many movies?